Sam Kahn of The Athletic, the Techspert, joins us now. And Sam, before the break, I read this quote that Greg Sankey had on Feinbaum yesterday on the potential of a team picking up the third loss in the SEC title game. I would expect that the committee continues the form of thinking that these championship games, that 13th data point is more of a reward and recognition for the work done. So here he is laying out a scenario where the championship game shouldn't matter for the SEC. Do you think he would have that same view for the Big 12 or ACC?
I'm sorry. What do you think? I mean, let's be real.
I do not think he would have that.
But because if Colorado goes and loses to BYU in the Big 12 championship game and Colorado has 3 losses, or is he going to be okay with Colorado getting one of those at-large bids? I think not.
Yeah. And this drives me nuts because especially, look, and Sam, you were around at 13 and 14, or 14, Baylor and TCU didn't have a 13th data point. And they were told that the 13th data point was the thing that mattered. So now, I don't know if things are changing. They've changed as a 12-team playoff, but the narrative enough for Greg Sankey is, well, I mean, if they get there, I mean, that's reward in and of itself. Merit badge onto you. I think the hypocrisy in that, and I cannot stand this, one of these things is not like the other nonsense, when I think, especially now, we're starting to see that outside of maybe a couple of teams, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, and the thing that bothers me the most about this is, to me, in my opinion, this is all very calculated by Greg Sankey, because we know the long game in this situation. It's looking ahead to 2026 and beyond. When they floated that trial balloon earlier this year about getting the Big Ten and the SEC extra automatic bids, we know where the minds are for those two commissioners and where those two conferences want this thing to head. They want it to be more for us, fewer for you, everyone else. And that's what this reeks of. So when you hear Greg Sankey and Tony Batiti and the Big Ten and SEC officials getting together to meet on their own away from everybody else, and then you hear the commissioners say, well, we just want to see how they're going to pick teams this year. We don't really want to comment on how it's going to be. But this is exactly what that is, in my opinion, from Sankey. It's him basically trying to lay out a threat, saying that if you guys penalize us for having a 3-loss team lose in the SEC title game, then we're going to go ahead and unilaterally change this playoff system to benefit us, because we're not going to eventually need your approval for it. You're not going to need unanimous approval to do this. And so that's what this is. And so that's what it reeks of to me. It's Sankey is sending a subtle message of what he expects and what he wants, so he can get the college football playoff selection committee to capitulate to his desires. Yeah.
It's just, I get mad, Sam, and maybe I shouldn't get mad, but I get mad. I want to calm down, but, having my alma mater be a direct victim of his interference, whether or not they would have made it either way or won, I'm trying to divorce my fandom from my journalism here, and all of it's kind of intersecting in a rage puddle.
It's hard. It's really hard. What happened last year to Florida State, to me, I thought never would happen in the existence of the 14 playoff. I never thought an undefeated power conference champion would get left out. And I still am a little bit shocked that it happened, even sitting here almost a year later, regardless of the reasoning. The bottom line is you earn it on the field, and I thought Florida State did that. And so what happened is this playoff has always been subjective, but we always wanted to believe you could win your way into it. We knew that wasn't the case for the group of 5, but at least as a power conference school, you want to know you could win your way into it. And then that blew that out of the water. And it's like, well, we have the 12 team now. Yes, we have the 12 team, but we've already tried to change it before you've even started it. And I just want everyone to have equal access. That's what I would like. I would like every conference champion in the FBS to have a bid, and then we can have as many at-larges as you want to have. If you want to have a 16 team with 10 conference champions and 6 at-larges, go for it. If you want to have 24 teams, go for it. But I think having that access and making a conference title mean something matters. And I understand why Greg Sankey is also taking this angle and this approach. Is because the conference is so big and it's so many teams. But this is part of the problem with having conferences this big. We should not have conferences that are 16 teams or 17 teams or 18 teams. It's ridiculous. This is not how it's supposed to be. The NFL doesn't have the NFC East with 10 teams and the NFC South with 7. It's ridiculous. And so, not to say they all have to be the exact same number, but they're way too big, and that creates problems for the playoff, and it creates problems for actually determining a champion when you don't have everybody play each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sam, this week, before we dive into the Big 12, a big old school SWC rivalry is back as a conference game in Texas and Arkansas. I don't expect Arkansas to win this game. I don't expect them also to get blown out like they did against Ole Miss, because I do think they'll have their dander up in Fayetteville, and that crowd will be so deeply into this that they can ride some momentum here. It's very cool to see this back as a conference rivalry. Arkansas has classically played Texas pretty well in the non-con battles that they've had over the years. What do you think about this one coming up?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I do think it's going to be a lot different than it was in 2021. I was there in Fayetteville when that happened, and buddy, I remember Steve Sarkisian at Big 12 Media Days, SEC Media Days this summer, said that Arkansas fans, in his opinion, hated Texas more than they loved their own team. And then the next day, someone asked Sam Pittman about it, and Sam Pittman is like, yeah, it's probably right. He's probably right about that, which blew my mind. But the amount of intensity and vitriol and just the buzz in that stadium that night, and then, of course, they all rushed the field after they won. And not only did they win, they hammered Texas that night. But it was really something to see. And you could get a feel for what the emotions really are like between the Arkansas fans and how they feel about Texas. And so with this being an 11 o'clock game, not a night game like the last one was, I think it'll be tempered down a little bit. And also, this is a lot better Texas team. I do think Texas is going to go in there and handle business. I like the way they looked against Florida last week. And to me, they started last week to look like the team that we saw in the first 6 weeks of the season before they had the Georgia game, before they had to fight and scratch and claw against Vanderbilt. This team's getting a little bit healthy. You started to see Quinn Ewers play a lot better. You started to see everything to start to click again. And I'm not saying that I think they're going to blow out Arkansas necessarily, but I would be surprised if this is a close game in the fourth quarter. I think Arkansas is a good team, but I think Texas is probably fed up with hearing all this criticism of their schedule and their resume this week. And they have the team that can go out there and put their foot down. I think they will. Well,
it's not their fault that Oklahoma and Florida and Mississippi State aren't good. Like, it's not
Michigan.
Michigan. Like, it's not their fault that happened. You know, it's Jim Harbaugh's fault that he left. It's Sharon Moore's fault for going, these three quarterbacks are fine. We'll be fine. Then who needs a quarterback to win the thing? Even though they didn't have a quarterback for 20 years and didn't win anything. Then they got one, won the national title, and then thought, that's a one-off. That was a fluke. So, yeah.
But it's Texas's fault, too, because they didn't show up for a half against Georgia. Yeah, and that's why we're here. And that's the fascinating part about this, is because Texas has 9 games of a body of work, and 8 of those games are against teams that are not necessarily great. And the one great team, used to be great team that we saw them against was Georgia, and they looked outclassed for a half of football before they got back into it. And so that's what makes these arguments about resume and how good a team is really fascinating, because do we put more weight on the one Georgia game when maybe they just had a bad night? And especially now that we see that Georgia is not as good as they played that night, or do we put more weight on the other 8 games and the entire body of work? That's what makes these discussions really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. In the Big 12 this week, Sam, Baylor goes to Morgantown 0-6 all time there. Now, they've on a 3-game winning streak, and during that 3-game winning streak, they've started shaking off old traditions that are bad. You know, losing to TCU, at home especially, but losing to TCU, not being able to run the ball, like all these things have started changing for Baylor. Can they go to West Virginia, a team that's also 5-4, and a team that's also started to play better, especially on defense, and shake that monkey off their back finally?
Yeah, I think they can. I think they're playing the type of ball offensively that they can do it. And I think the confidence is there. That's the one thing that to me seems like the really big difference between this team 2 months ago and now is there's confidence and there's belief. I know there were times last year where you just felt like there was this sense of, oh, here we go again. And then the game just kind of gets out of hand. And I thought that they were headed down that path after the Colorado loss, after the Iowa State loss, after the losing streak they had, and they've really picked themselves up off the mat. And there's real. I heard Mac Rhodes talk about it earlier this week. That team hasn't quit on Dave Aranda, and I think that's a testament to those players, a testament to that staff that they've been able to continue to fight. And so I do think they're good enough to do it. It is fascinating to me in this series that they have not yet won in Morgantown. And I'll tell you what, I was reminiscent about this because when I was writing the preview for the Big 12 games this week and looking back, I was looking back at some of the scores from this series: 70-63, 73-42, 62-38. I mean, they used to be some really, really wild, crazy games between these two teams, of course, in a different era with different coaches, but they have had a lot of close games. I think more than half of these games have been decided by one score or less, and I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case again.
Yeah, there's I know it won't be 70-63. I know that it won't be that, but yeah.
I remember year one, Charlie Brewer as a freshman leading the comeback.
Yeah,
late in the game. I mean, this has been a fun series between these two.
Yeah, it really has. Kansas and BYU is a 2.5-point spread at home, a 9:15 Central kickoff for BYU. That for 9-0 and 3-6, that is really saying something about BYU and the way that they win games. Because I believe, like, if BYU wins, it's probably going to be by a field goal or so. Like, that's what they do, especially lately. And last week was just another thing altogether. First off, your opinions on the Holy War and the end of that game, and then BYU versus Kansas, and Kansas the last couple weeks starting to look like, oh, wait, this was the team we all picked to be in the mix at the beginning of this thing.
Have you seen the win probability graphs for the games that BYU won against Utah and Oklahoma State? It's insane.
Yeah.
It's absolute insanity. This is very 2022 TCU level stuff that they've got going on. But the Holy War thing, when I was watching that game live and when they showed the replay, I thought, yeah, the guy grabbed the guy. The defender grabbed the receiver. I thought that was a pretty clear penalty. Now, I understand the frustration with Utah fans of them calling that, but in that situation. But look, I'm very much a believer of take care of business when you have the chance to. They had a whole half to put some points on the board, and they didn't. And you've got to get that done. So I don't love the administrators calling out the refs. I don't love Mark Harlan doing what he did. But at the same time, I really wish we had, and this is a whole other tangent, I really wish we had officials be available to reporters to answer questions after games about these calls, rather than just, okay, you get a pool reporter when you have one controversial call, or we have to get a statement. I really wish we could have some accountability where we could at least ask somebody after games, just like we do the coaches and the players, ask them questions about calls and just get clarity. I think that would do a lot in helping build trust amongst the fans. But this BYU team obviously has some magic. They're obviously able to find ways to win. Kansas, this is not your typical 3-6 football team now because they're finally figuring it out. It's amazing what happens when you don't throw the ball to the other team. Jalen Daniels is taking care of the ball, and Iowa State was a little bit banged up defensively last week, but he looked like old Jalen Daniels last week. He looked like first half of the 2023 season Jalen Daniels. And if that's how he is going to play on Saturday, BYU is going to have everything it can handle. And so that's why the spread is so close. And that's going to make it's another late kickoff, and we're all going to be up late. And I think we're all going to be watching with bated breath at the end of this one.
Yeah. I think you're right. Not talked about game of the week to me is Arizona State and Kansas State. People, it's like the world has forgotten that ASU's 7-2. Like they've lost 2 games. They lost one to Cincinnati a couple weeks ago, which they didn't have their quarterback for. And then they lost to Tech earlier before they really hit their stride. Look, I think Kansas State wins this game, but Kenny Dillingham has installed some sense of belief in this team and confidence. And I mean, they play intense. They're physical. They're playing a team that's very much like them this week. Avery Johnson versus Sam Levitt might be the difference in this game because running back to running back, it's pretty awesome, comparison-wise. But I think this one's going to be a slobber knocker in Manhattan.
Yeah, no doubt. And you also wonder how healthy is Cam Scatterbo when you go into this game. I know he was trying to get in the game last week, but you want him to be at 100% if Arizona State's going to have a chance because the way he runs, I mean, you need every bit of him you can get in this game. This is a testament to Kenny Dillingham and that staff. I thought when he first got the job, I was really impressed with the staff he put together. It was a good mix of guys, some veteran guys, but a lot of younger guys and guys who could really recruit. And the energy level, you can tell that the players have really fed off of that. And they're, like you said, there's a belief. They play hard and they play smart. They play a lot smarter than they did. This team has really matured and I think has gotten better. And they're sitting here. They're still in the Big 12 title game hunt.
Yeah.
They went out. They're still in this conversation. So for them to be at this point and already be postseason eligible is a huge turnaround when we picked them last in the conference. And K-State, obviously, I think that week off was much needed because the last time we saw them was not great. They've got to pick themselves up off the mat after losing that game against Houston. But I do think Avery Johnson will come out better, sharper this time, and he's just got to really take better care of the ball. That's really what it comes down to for him.
Yeah, absolutely he does. Sam, are you on the road this week or at home?
I'm at home this weekend, so I'll be watching it all from the couch.
Me too. Isn't it lovely?
Isn't
it lovely? Like, look, I watched it all from the couch. I was on the road. I was in Gulf Shores, Alabama, but I wasn't doing anything but hanging out with my buddies. So, yeah, it worked out well. Sam Kahn of The Athletic. Sam, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, you too.
That's Sam Kahn of The Athletic.